Haven't done one of these in a while. Happy to get into a Clay deep dive. Use case, finding the previous manager of somebody who just started a new job. And of course, this is all happening in Clay. This is what I'm going to be using. The Clay techniques are formulas, kind of, prompting and AI, of course. Structured outputs, super useful feature. And the waterfall for finding emails and merge columns. Like some pretty simple stuff. Merge columns, super easy. It's just really nice to be able to use it. And then I think the most interesting part here is really the prompting and AI and the structured outputs. Let's get into it. I talked about the use case. So we are feeding the workflow people who have recently started a different job, and we want to reach out to the manager, their previous manager, who basically just lost talent, to offer services to fill that gap. Challenges, just like pretty simple. We don't have a LinkedIn URL in the input data, and we have a lack of clear data. I will get into that more in the workflow, but there is no data in the public domain that clearly tells you who managed whom. There are no company directories online, and this means there is some point in this workflow where some, how do I call it, just basically some limitations how accurate the data can be, because you have to make assumptions in a certain part of the workflow. And here's how I worked around that. This ran, of course, for a few more rows. I usually test with 25, but because of data, I'm just leaving it at a few. So this is the input data that we take: first name, last name, the title and the company name. We don't have the company domain. That's not a problem yet. So the first step that I'm doing is to get from these inputs to a person's LinkedIn profile. And the way I always do this, which isn't 100%, but it's really good, is, and I'm not sure there is a 100% way, which is basically a Google search. I usually use Serper, which is a Google search API, but you can use the native integration from Clay here that works equally well. It just costs a Clay credit. And what I'm doing here is basically I enter the search terms, which is first name, last name, the company, and then the trick is to restrict the search to site, LinkedIn.com/in, because that is where personal profiles will be found. So the Google search will be the person's first name, last name, company name only on LinkedIn.com/in, and that returns, and this is the beauty of it. Let's look at a result where we have multiple search results. You see here the search results, and by and large, the first link is going to be the profile of that person. And that is just not a perfect match, but with these inputs, this is kind of as good as you get. You can always layer on more verification. So you can, for example, add another step that says, hey, of this person's LinkedIn profile that I found, does she really have this title, or did she hold this title in the past, or something like that. But you easily get into the land of diminishing returns. At least I'm happy to go down rabbit holes, but at one point it doesn't make sense anymore. You may get from 90% to 91% accuracy for certain things, or like something like that, but you can always add another 0.5%, and then you will never finish a workflow. I think I'm talking more to myself than to anybody else. What this does, you map out by really just going into the results column, and then you can hover over it and say add as a column, and then you name it, and then you can map out always the first search result of that Google search, and that in all likelihood will be the person's LinkedIn URL. It's a nice little hack. So what that gives us is the LinkedIn URL, which we can use for the Clay native integration to run the enrichment. Enriched person from profile will give us all the beautiful LinkedIn data we may want. And what's really valuable in here is that we get the experience, which includes previous companies, start dates, and so on. It's basically an array of data. The problem is that it's not always in the same place. So like, just because somebody has a current experience doesn't mean the one before that. So always experience number 2 will be the previous company. And it's very hard to get around this just by using a formula, because you kind of need to interpret what's in those data items. And this is where AI comes into play. So what is the approach I'm using here is actually, this is coming from later, so chronologically that shouldn't be here in the beginning. So what's happening next is that I use the prompt, and I want to double click on that identifies the previous employer. The trick here is it's not a formula, it's AI, and I'm using here actually only use AI, which is working with data we have in the workflow. So I don't want to like have a Clagent go out into the world yet. I just want to identify the previous company of that person, because when you use a Clagent for that, it is a little bit too wild to have it actually look at the right data and so on and so on. So this is a better approach. And how the prompt is structured, I always start with read the whole prompt first, then work step by step. And I always try to have it adjust to the task at hand. So in this case, I say fully understand the structure of the input data so you correlate it correctly. So it doesn't like draw the wrong conclusions or maps data the wrong way, that it like takes the company domain from this field and the company name from that. It really has to understand the structure first. So then the task, you will be given an array of data, which is nested, meaning like stuck together. I think I just explained the word to myself. And then and will include that person's work experience. So here I'm very clear what the task is. Your task is to identify this, the name of a previous company a person has worked for, and this must be different from their current company. The domain of that company and the last title they held at that company. That is a really clear guidance on what I want, because when you say, I want to know the company, yeah, it will probably give you the right thing, but I hope this shows a little bit how when you are more specific, you get higher quality outputs. Ambiguity is the enemy of good results in these things, right? Then after the task, I go into instructions. And here, if a person has changed roles inside their current company, that's not what I want. The company name you find must be different from the current one, which is any of these. And then I'm already linking to, okay, I'm not sure why this doesn't show up, but basically this will show the company name we've put in the beginning. And it shows, yeah, like 2 places where we may have the company name. Anyways, the array is what I'm putting in here, and this is actually interesting because I wanted to look at all of this. Let me show this to you again. We want to look at a person's experience, and I want to drop in all of this in order to have AI work with that. And the way you do it is to hover over the parent thing you want to do work on, and then you can say take action on list, and then you can say ask question about items with AI, and this will actually generate the column you see here, and it will have this array of data in the prompt. Then instructions are ending here. Output always super important. Your output name, your output must be the name and the domain, blah blah blah. The really helpful thing here is to use structured outputs. What that means is, you remember in the beginning I said your task is to find 3 things. These are basically those 3 things, and the way AI works, it if you prompt it well, it understands what has to go where. This is just crazy. So you can say previous company domain. This is like a little trick or tip. Always be super descriptive with these things, because if I call it company domain, that's actually quite vague. Current company, previous company, maybe I should even call it previous company domain of the person or whatever, right? But be descriptive with these column titles. And what's beautiful about this is that the results of the AI column will be put into these fields. And what that means is that I can, once I have the results, this is how that looks like. So we have the response, which is something you always get from an AI column in Clay. But here we have what I defined: previous company name, previous company title, previous company domain. Beautiful, because what you can do from here, you can just map those out. So for example, going on this, previous company name, add as a column, and then you have it mapped out as a column. You don't always need to map out. You can always deep link into the actual result of the column from other logic that you use. But for certain things, it's just a good practice because it gives you this clean, neat overview of the results. Let's actually ignore what's happening here. I want to get back to that later. What is happening next is that to solve for that problem of, hey, we don't know who the previous manager was, right? You can kind of only get to this by looking at titles. Of course, this is not a perfect process. So a company that has 100 employees, just by random statistics, or not random, but just by statistics, you will have a harder time picking the right person. But also there are just more possibilities. Maybe they have 5 art directors, because this is about design companies, right? Or they have multiple heads of design or whatever. Probably they won't have multiple heads of design, but you get where I'm getting at. It's not quite clear who will have been the manager of the person we put into the beginning of the workflow. And the way I try to circumvent this is I've 2 different approaches here in the workflow. And I want to go over one of the prompts, one of the Claygens I'm using for that. Here in this case, I chose Argon, the most expensive, but also the best model, because here we really are pushing it quite a bit. I usually default to lower end models, but because there was like some time constraints here, I built this in a very short time. And in that case, you generally go for a higher end model. If you go for a lower end model, usually it needs more attention to the prompt, because it will just not know exactly what to do. But in this case, I took the big guns and went out with a relatively expensive model. So what I'm doing here, read the whole prompt first. Because I'm using Clay credits, I say do an extreme amount of work, because it's not running through the clients or my own LLM instance or OpenAI or Anthropic. It actually uses Clay credits for that. And because it does this, you can kind of do some data arbitrage and just push the Claygens to do a lot of work, because it kind of doesn't matter. It's 3 Clay credits anyway for this thing, which is relatively expensive. So then the inputs are, the inputs actually I put at the beginning. Oh, this is interesting. The inputs I put at the beginning because actually this prompt I generated with Claude. That's a really important part of this thing, because I actually just talked to Claude with, I want your help constructing an AI web scraping agent and writing that prompt. Here's what the task will be. And then I just really describe exactly the task I want to do. I want to accomplish, which is trying to identify that person's manager. And then this is what, not exactly, where is it? Okay, so this is what I'm getting. You're an AI web scraping agent. This is what you get, and this is what I put in the beginning here. So right at the start, and then I can iterate and just copy and paste the rest of the prompt here without always having to remap the inputs, because it's always going to be the same employee first name, last name, and so on. So this is how I got to the prompt initially. Sometimes I tweak those prompts because I have an intuition what will work well and what won't. I never use it quite just copy and paste and run it. There's always something I can optimize, but by and large, this is how the prompt is constructed. You're an AI web scraping agent, blah, blah, blah. Use the title to determine organizational level and department, generate potential manager titles above them, above the input that I gave it. For example, designer or senior designer or junior designer or something like that. And then here the prompt is assessing what is the most likely title to look for. I'm not sure all of this is happening, like timeline overlap, it's in here, but I don't think it actually accesses that. That is what you do with my first approach, where you actually look at the data inside the table. But because we don't have it in the table, you can always try to get this as best as possible. So for example, company size, structure fit is when we look at a company with 2,000 employees, different than looking at a company with 20 employees. And again, this is not the single best way you can do this prompt, but at one point you just have to put things into production and see if it works. So here the output is supposed to be the name, the title, confidence score, and the supporting evidence. So where did the data come from? And here again, I'm using structured outputs. So the likely manager name, the likely manager title, the confidence score, the supporting evidence, and if we have it, if Claygen finds in the process who or the previous manager's LinkedIn URL, I already want that. Cool. So this is running, this is happening, and then we get beautiful results in here. Here I want to really acknowledge that this will not be a thing where I'm confident it will return like even 80% accuracy, because you can't really measure it against what's true. Of course, when you really know who was somebody's manager, you can say this result is correct, this result is not correct. But the whole idea of this thing is to find managers at scale for companies where you don't know who they worked for, and it is inherently fuzzy. You can only make the process so good that there is a chance it's correct, but here you really need to put it into production and see, does this generally lead to the right people or not? And going forward, this would be the next iteration on that. One more thing. Going back before I go to the next iteration. What you see here, this is probably helpful. One of the structured outputs is manager's LinkedIn URL, right? This is what you see here. So when I go into the results, beautiful manager's LinkedIn URL, and we can map that out. This has been done here. So we do have a LinkedIn URL. If we have a likely previous manager, but we don't have a LinkedIn URL, this is the same approach that I used in the beginning. Likely manager name, previous company domain, previous company, because this field actually comes from the employee we put in, and for them it's the previous company, and then linkedin.com/in, and this I let run conditionally, meaning very much at the end of this. Okay, very much at the end of this, I'm prompting it only run if the field with the likely manager LinkedIn URL is empty, because I don't want to run this if I already have a LinkedIn URL, but I do want to run it when I don't have it. And because I have now two columns which potentially contain the result I want, what you use for that is a merge column. So basically that's how it goes. You say, where are we? Merge column, and that looks like this. It's super simple. And you just actually put in the first column you want to look, okay, that's company manager LinkedIn URL, and then next you look into the other column, and it will just populate in that order. If the result is in here, that's going to be put in the merge column. If there is no result, but there is a result here, that's going to be put in the merge column. Super simple, yet super powerful. Use merge columns. And for those, then we have what we need, because we have for the waterfall, let me quickly show it. Finding emails with the waterfall, we need the company domain, we need the full name, and we need the social profile URL. We have all of that, and then the waterfall can run. And in the end, we get the most likely, or the email for the most likely person who is in need of, like in this case, design services. And yeah, that's it. So what I would caution, and this is where a little bit of strategy comes in, I would not use copy that sends an email to this person and says, you just lost an employee, or like you have this need because your employee recently started a new job. The point is, we are not certain enough that this is actually that person. That being said, they will be somebody with an appropriate title at a company that has lost somebody, that has lost talent. So if the copy reflects that, even if it's not exactly the right person, I think you can still make that work in a positive way. Or you adjust the copy in a way that you say, hey, we know your company, and maybe the next approach here would be not to find just one person, which is the likely potential previous manager, but that we actually provide multiple email addresses for, let's say, the top 5 people that potentially could have been the manager. And yeah, this is my approach. I want to like summarize it once more. We take 4 data fields as an input: first name, last name, title, and company name. With this information, I use a Google search to find that person with first name, last name, company name on LinkedIn. That LinkedIn, the first search result is most likely that person's LinkedIn URL. Based on that LinkedIn URL, I enrich that person, so I get rich data about this contact, like what is their current title, where are they based, and most importantly, all their previous experience, where we have all the data of what companies did they work for, what roles did they hold at these companies. And the next step is to use AI on this array of data, which is the experience. On that subset of data, I'm using a prompt that goes through that and returns to me the name of the previous company, and the what was it? The name of the previous company, the title the person held at the previous company, and the company domain. And with this data, I go out and feed another Clagent. Where is it? Putting this data into this other Clagent and asking it to like go out into the world and try to identify the person who may have been the previous manager. There's one other approach in here that I don't want to completely glance over, which is basically, where is it? So it's a find contacts at company, and that takes in the previous or the company domain, and then organizational hierarchies. This is an input that I've built with another AI agent. Basically, sorry, I explained this the other way around. So you need to do this first, and this output will then be used for finding these titles. So the approach here is to look just at the company title, company size, industry, and company description. I have all of this data in the Clay workflow. And what I want then is to analyze the given job title and determine what is the most likely title of that direct manager or supervisor based on industry standards in graphic design and graphic and creative departments. And that will take the name, the title of the person at the previous company, graphic designer, senior graphic designer, and will match it with likely the art director was the manager. I wasn't happy with that. I didn't love the results. That's too much art director here. And there's only like, maybe that would be the better approach, but in this case I decided against it, also because like I've too little experience in this area to make really good judgment. I did of course ask AI to come up with like what would be the likely titles. This is what you see here, but I didn't love the results is what I'm saying. So I didn't trust it fully. It was like too much art director for me, so I went another way, and this is what I showed initially in this walkthrough, basically using the Clagent and having that go out into the world. And yeah, that's it. These are the things that I employed in this workflow: formulas, prompting AI in structured outputs, waterfall for emails, and the merge columns. And yeah, thanks for watching. Reach out if you have questions about this, and see you next time.